Autism is no longer rare. Today, 1 in 36 children is diagnosed autistic, and that number keeps rising. But what's more alarming is how misunderstood this diagnosis is. Online, you might hear things about being proudly autistic or supporting neurodiversity, and I completely agree. I love, especially parents who love their children up no matter who they are. And when people come into our office, we respect them and we love on them no matter who they are, too. But here's the thing for parents dealing with children with level 2, level 3 autism, it's not just a different way of thinking or a unique personality. These are the children that are really struggling with their health in a multitude of ways. And really, families in this case are often in constant crisis because these are the kids who can't sleep, They self injure, they scream for hours, they live trapped inside this body that's stuck in nervous system stress and overload. And these are the families that are really trying hard to hold it all together. What can be frustrating is you talk to the medical system and they blame it all on genetics, or you talk to a functional medicine doctor and they say, it's all in the gut, it's all in the gut. But what if there's something even deeper? What if there's actually a root cause that has to do with the nervous system that is preventing a child from being able to heal and get out of this stuck storm? So in this video, I want to dive into the 3 levels of autism and give you some new perspectives that can help you better understand your child and, regardless of where they're at, continue to support them, continue to love them, but actually start to get to the root of healing. So I want to share a quick story of actually 2 different 13-year-olds that came into our office. One was level 1 autism, and mom said, guess what, Dr. Ty? I love Seth the way he is. I know he's a little quirky and he does get overwhelmed. He has some sensory challenges where he gets like hyper reactive, maybe gets stuck on things a little bit longer than we want. There's times where he doesn't sleep the best. He's a little constipated, but I know he's going to do well to be able to serve his community. And I adore him. I don't want his autism to change. Now we flip that with 13-year-old Abdi, who came in with level 3 autism. In this case, at 13 years old, he was still wearing diapers. He could grunt a few sounds. He had significant tics. He would do this intense stomping to try to regulate his nervous system. Several times a week, he would be up for hours at a time. And in his case, mom said, the one thing I want for him is to actually be an independent person in this world. And you could probably understand in that mom's case, not only does she want the best for her child, but could you imagine the amount of work and the amount of stress and the amount of energy she had to put out to care for her child every single day, every single night, never really feeling like she could take a break or sort of let down herself. So those are examples of this intense difference between different levels of autism. And that's what I want to share with you today is when we look at level 1, these are the kids that naturally require the least support. They maybe need some support for social communication, for reading cues, kind of maybe knowing when to end a conversation, when to start a conversation. They're going to have some maybe inflexible behaviors. Maybe they get stuck. They perseverate on situations. They don't transition quite as well as parents want. And likely the nervous system has shifted into stress mode, and it is affecting things like sleep, like digestion. Level 2 then, now is when the nervous system starts to ramp up the level of stress. So if we go up this hill here, nervous system stress intensifies with each level of autism. So level 2 now, with more stress in the nervous system, you're going to start to see greater communication challenges, more likely to have repetitive behaviors, to have stims, to have toe walking, to have something where their body is trying to regulate their nervous system because there's actually more stress in their nervous system. When we get to level 3 now, basically it's level 2 amplified even more. So now that kiddo might be completely nonverbal, as I mentioned in Abdi's case, still having accidents throughout the day, having very intense, very big stims, very big meltdowns, things where the quality of life is really, really impacted not only for the child, but for the family and the teachers and those around them. So when it comes to these different levels, then is we're looking at them as more and more levels of nervous system stress, specifically stuck in fight or flight mode, stuck in what we call dysautonomia. It's when the nervous system gets into fight flight mode and it gets stuck there and it can't activate the brake and the healing pedal. So, kiddos with level 2, level 3 autism, often they might not be able to progress through things like PT, through OT, through speech, through behavioral like ABA therapies. And what happens is their nervous system is so locked in. Parents are doing what feels like everything, and yet a year goes by, 2 years, 3 years go by, and you feel like they're almost the same amount of stuck as they were a few years ago. And so that's what I want to address here next is how does the nervous system get locked in and what can we do different to support them? One thing we love doing in our office is working with other therapy clinics. We have a lot of OT, PT, speech therapists that refer to us and we work together in tangent. And what we find is when we can take the stuck stress out of the nervous system, where a kiddo maybe was plateaued, suddenly they're progressing again through their therapy much better than they were before. So, when it comes to different stresses, there's what Dr. Tony Ebel has pioneered. It's called the perfect storm. And this is basically a series of stresses that add up, and the more there are, the more significant we see challenges with kiddos. So, early on, it might be prenatal stress. And this is not that there's like mom or dad or the environment did anything wrong. It's just part of having a baby. When my wife was 34 weeks pregnant, she fell, she broke her ankle, she had significant fractures, she had to have things reset, needed 2 plates, 9 pins put in, and it was a huge stress on her body that we weren't expecting. We have a lot of times, if there's a lot of prenatal stress, what happens is now mom's nervous system is starting to have more stress involved, and that stress chemistry that's flowing through her blood is being shared with baby, and it can start to intensify the perception of stress for a newborn baby even before they're coming out into the world. The most overlooked piece of the perfect storm when it comes to talking to the traditional medical doctor. Maybe you've talked to your child's pediatrician and they just keep blaming it on genetics. And you say, well, I feel like there's more going on than just genetics. One of the biggest things is birth trauma, whether it is induction, forceps, C-section, maybe suction, being stuck in the birth canal. We've talked to families where one mom, she was laboring for 48 hours and baby wasn't progressing. One mom who said over 30 hours of labor, baby's head was stuck in her pelvis. So now each contraction was putting a tremendous amount of pressure and stress on baby's neck. We're going to dive into why that is next here. But before we do, the third component of the perfect storm then is early toxins. So maybe your kiddo was constipated or refluxy or colicky. Maybe they had a lot of ear infections or strep throat, RSV, like immune issues. So they needed a lot of medications early on. Maybe it was exposure to environmental toxins, whether it's lead or heavy metals. Maybe it was mold or an environmental situation that added up. Ultimately, the more of these early stresses that happen, now we start to intensify the amount of stress on baby's nervous system early on. And as we know from adults, stress is something that impacts our health greatly because what happens is our nervous system has a balance. There's the gas pedal and the brake pedal. The gas pedal goes up when there's stress. And it's good to have gas pedal if you're playing on the playground, if you're playing sports, having a competition, you have a deadline at work, you need this gas pedal. It's known as the sympathetic side of the nervous system, and it's the fight flight response. So you may have heard of sympathetic overdrive. This is what happens when now the gas pedal just starts to get amped up, amped up, amped up. The adrenal glands lie in this category. They make cortisol, they make adrenaline, the stress hormones. Again, as an adult, maybe you've heard of adrenal fatigue if someone's been under stress all the time. But what happens is all of these three things all activate the brake pedal. So that's why the more of those the more of those there is early on in life, the more the gas pedal starts to get activated. And what happens now is you can see this little teeter-totter here. If the gas pedal is going up, it means the brake pedal is going to start to go down. And here's the thing, is the brake pedal is where healing occurs. This is rest, so it's for sleep. Mentioned with Abdi, if he's going to be up for a few hours multiple times a week, that just weighs on mom, but it's also a good sign that he's not going to be able to get good rest to clear inflammation out of his brain, to be able to reset his nervous system, to be able to digest food. This is why constipation, leaky gut, functional medicine approaches are always trying to clean up the gut, clean up the gut, clean up the gut. In the world of autism, this is where growth happens, where not only like physical growth, but milestones happen. If the nervous system's stuck in gas pedal mode, then we start to see delayed milestones because now a kiddo's body is so stuck in stress, it can't go through the normal progression: roll, sit, crawl, walk. So all these things can start to be impacted when the brake pedal isn't being activated. So when it comes to then knowing the difference between gas pedal and brake pedal, we're looking at a specific part of the nervous system that has the biggest impact, and that's the vagus nerve. So you might have heard of the vagus nerve. You might have heard of vagal tone. That's how well the vagus nerve is working. And it's something that is gaining a lot of traction, a lot of headway in the world of the nervous system, in the world of healing, and in the world of autism because it's so critical. So the vagus nerve is one of the areas that we see thrown off most commonly when there is birth trauma. The reason this is if you picture, we've got our brain here and our spinal cord. Brain surrounded by the skull, and then we've got our neck. So as I mentioned with birth trauma, the most stress happens in the neck area because it's such a vulnerable area for a newborn baby. And as a result, if there's stress here, it starts to impact the vagus nerve because that's coming from the brainstem. So in our office specifically, we see this base of the skull and this upper part of the neurospinal system. When those are off, if they've been stuck, if they've been pulled, if they've been twisted during labor and delivery, it starts to injure the vagus nerve and its ability to then activate the brake pedal. The vagus nerve is the major brake pedal. So that's why you might have heard of something like vagal nerve stimulation, vagal nerve exercises. Anything activating the vagus nerve puts the body into brake pedal mode, and it's critical then for pooping, for immune system, for detoxing, for sleeping at night. They've done studies where if they cut the vagus nerve, inflammation runs rampant through the body. They've done studies where if they cut the vagus nerve, obviously the gut, the intestines, the motility, everything goes kaput. Inflammation now starts to increase in the gut. So if you're working with your functional medicine doctor on decreasing inflammation, if you're working on trying to activate pooping or clear inflammation out of the body, the vagus nerve is one of the keys to do that. So that is, when it comes to helping the nervous system, is getting the vagus nerve online is one of the most critical pieces, because now we start to activate the brake pedal. And if the vagus nerve can get back online, now this little teeter-totter can start to shift in the other direction. Now we actually allow the gas pedal to start to calm down because the brake pedal, the vagus nerve, is being able to activate. We see kids in our office who sleep better. It's one of the most common side effects, side benefits of our adjustments is a kiddo that is just like so wired. I remember early in my career, this 13-year-old, also giving a lot of 13-year-old examples here, but Brian would come in. He would wake up at 4 a.m., 4:30 most mornings, started getting adjusted, suddenly was sleeping till 7. parents for the first time had to wake him up before school because his nervous system could start to relax. So when it comes to these different levels, ultimately what we tend to see is that with each level of autism, there tends to be more and more stress in the nervous system. A lot of times, as we progress upward, we also see less vagus nerve function. And so it's not to say that at level one, it's just some little quirks. It's often that, yeah, these kiddos might struggle with some sleep, with some immune challenges, digestive issues. Maybe they're not as coordinated motor wise, whether it's fine motor or gross motor, some sensory challenges, some anxieties. But ultimately, the more stressed the nervous system is, the more the vagus nerve is offline. Now we just start to see all those challenges start to magnify. And so in our office then is we're less worried about the individual diagnosis, the exact level a kiddo's on. What that is beneficial for is getting support services, maybe getting those therapies or an IEP at school, or kind of having a baseline to work off of. But when it comes to actually getting your child better, we say, well, let's just for a moment set the diagnosis aside and measure their nervous system to see where their nervous system is at and measure how much stress their nervous system is under, because the more stress it's under, the more all those challenges are going to start to show up and start to appear. And also, the more likely it is that you've tried a lot of things, whether it is primitive reflex integration, whether it is chelation for a detox, whether it is brushing to try to help their sensory system. All these things can be good, but if the nervous system's locked in stress, it's going to have a lot tougher time getting in and making a change and making a difference. So what we do in our office then is we take a look specifically at the nervous system to see what is happening and what amount of stress is on your child's nervous system. So the first scan that we do is this thermal scan, and it's measuring specifically on the autonomic nerves. Are there stress there? The autonomics are the major coordinator between the gas pedal and the brake pedal. And this neural thermal scan is measuring for temperature. If one side's warmer than the other side, it helps give us clues as to what areas of the nervous system are under stress and how we can then use our gentle neurologically based chiropractic adjustments to help get the nervous system back on track. So, as is classic, this upper neck is very common because here's where the vagus nerve comes from and is most often injured during the birth process. So white is ideal, green is mild, blue is moderate, and red is severe when it comes to different levels of stress on the nervous system. And so ultimately, we do this scan first. This scan is going to have the most impact, as I said, on the autonomics. So gut, immune system, hormonal system, endocrine system are most represented by this scan. The next scan we do is the neurospinal EMG. This one is most critical for movement patterns and coordination. And for when it comes to autism, one of the most critical scans, because the more stress on this scan, the more stress is actually being fed from the body into the brain. And that's one of the biggest things we're always looking for is if the brain, little wiggly brain there, what it's doing is it's receiving information from the body. It's also receiving information from the environment. So maybe lights, maybe sounds, maybe textures, things are too stressful in the environment. So the environment can send stress into the brain. But guess what? The body can send stress into the brain as well. Regardless, it's going to show up as outbursts, as sensory challenges, as the digestive immune challenges we talked about, as sleep, as emotional difficulties, big emotions, tough to settle, tough to calm, tough to transition, right? Those are all signs of a nervous system that's under stress. And it's easy to sometimes point the picture, always be looking in the environment, but what we're looking for in our office is what's going on inside the body. Because if the body's sending stress into the brain, it can actually be even more stressful for the brain than a stressful environment, because if the brain can't coordinate what's going on internally, it doesn't even want anything to do with engaging in the external world. So that's specifically what we're measuring on this scan. This was the 13-year-old that I mentioned that would get up at 4 a.m. One of the reasons being, you can see stress, 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 stress. Basically, at every level of his nervous system, it's bombarding his brain with all of this stress, and it's actually going into primarily feeding into the cerebellum, which then is controlling motor coordination. In Brian's case, he couldn't write a 3 in class. At this ropes course in OT, he would just crawl at the bottom, never actually climb to the top. Once we started adjusting him, we saw major improvements in this scan, and teachers noticed that he is now better with his fine motor. He's writing better. He wrote a 3 for the first time. He started climbing to the top of this ropes class, and several months into care, he's looking at his parents. He's like, "Can I tell him? Can I tell him?" I'm like, "Yeah, Brian, go ahead." He looks at me. He goes, "Dr. Ty, let me show you." And for the first time ever, he tied a shoe. And he had been 13 years old, but didn't have the motor coordination to tie his shoe because his body was just sending so much stress into his brain, he couldn't figure things out. So that's what we're measuring with that neural EM and this neural spinal EMG is muscle energy, which has to do with coordination and has to do with how much stress the brain is receiving. And then the last test I'll share before we wrap up this video is heart rate variability. And ultimately, this white dot we want to see in the green. If it's gone down to mild, moderate, or severe, what it's showing is that the nervous system is not just been under recent stress, but it's been under stress long enough that it's draining your child's resiliency. It's draining their battery. And here again, they're going to not be able to respond to the external world, and they're not going to be able to respond to their internal body world as well. So the goal with this scan is anytime we see this white dot out of the green, we know that it's a deeper level of stress. Things have added up and started to build inside the body even more. So as we bring everything together here in this video, I want you to know that there is a lot of categories of autism. What they do have in common, what we see over and over again, is how much stress is in a child's nervous system. The more the nervous system's stuck in fight flight, in the sympathetic overdrive, the more dysautonomia, this imbalance in the gas pedal and the brake pedal start to occur, the more likely it is that your child's at a higher level of autism. Regardless of what level they're at, our goal is to see that potential in them to help their nervous system do the best it can. By getting out of fight flight, we start to put them into healing mode for sleep, for digestion, for immune system, for inflammation, to not only start to heal internally, to start to have fine motor, gross motor changes, but now to open them up and have the resiliency and have the reserves and have the ability to take on all the other therapies, all the other nutritional things, the probiotics and the supplements and the detoxes and all the other good things you're doing for them. They have the ability to handle that and take advantage of it because their nervous system is online. So if that resonates with you, if you're curious to see what your child's scans look like, please reach out, give us a call, shoot us an email, shoot us a message. Know we're here for you and know we love to take care of your child as well.